Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Bethanne, and in my mid-month wrap-up that I posted earlier this week, one book that I talked about is this one, Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which is epic fantasy, and I mentioned that I wanted to talk about it a little more, maybe do a standalone review, so I am here with that. So this book is the first in a trilogy. It's the Liveship Traders Trilogy. And this fantasy series has been around for a little while. This book was published in 1998, and so I'm like, how did I not read this or know about it? This would have been a part of the backbone of my fantasy experience in like middle school and high school, if I'd known about it, because it was new, coming out new as I was entering middle school and high school. I think the second book in the series, I think, was originally published in 2003. So a 5-year difference. But yeah, so I was in high school when the second book came out. Like, oh my gosh, how did I not know about this? But anyway, so one little quote on the cover that I get a big kick out of is George R.R. Martin saying, "Fantasy as it ought to be written." And I kind of agree. I mean, this is epic fantasy in the same vein as George R.R. Martin, in the same vein as Sanderson, um, Robert Jordan, who was writing in the 90s. And up until recently, but his first books were coming out all through the late 80s and 90s, and it has that sort of feel. So like all of those epic fantasy stories, we start out slow, we gather a lot of characters and a lot of POVs over time. This book has, or sorry, the world that this book is in has magic, but none of our characters really like use it. It's not like a magic user sort of world with wizards and sorcerers and things. And the magic that is in this world is very, very mysterious. It seems to be geographically specific. So the characters who we're following all live in a shoreline empire, with a capital city called Jamelia City. And much of the story is centered on some families who live in a very kind of outlying border town to the north of that city called Bingtown. And Bingtown is very special. It's a port town, it's a trading town, and the old families that originally settled Bingtown, traveling from the southern kind of part of the empire or kingdom up to Bingtown, faced a lot of struggles when they initially colonized it, and a lot of those struggles had to do with the geographically specific magic in the area. So there's a very mysterious river called the Rainwild River that empties into the ocean just north of Bingtown. And the river itself is very magical and mysterious, and led to a lot of hardship and death for the early trader families. And so what gets gradually revealed through this book is that some of those original trading families that had settled in that area really kind of stuck it out on like the magical banks of this river. But then a lot of the families moved and settled this town called Bingtown that's kind of just out of the sphere of magical influence, I think. But then they maintain very close ties with those families that are up the Rainwild River. They call them the Rainwild Traders. And as we kind of start to learn through the book, those Rainwild traders and then the Bingtown traders, to a lesser extent, have essentially made a huge number of sacrifices in order to maintain their presence in this area and to be able to sell kind of magical goods that come down this river. And those sacrifices start to become really kind of the backbone of the story as they're revealed, starting to get revealed later in the book, but they're not even all revealed at the end of this book. But part of this magic is that there's a mysterious wood called wizard wood, and when you build ships out of wizard wood, those ships actually have the ability to sort of take on very lifelike characteristics. And in particular, they can actually become kind of imbued with the souls of the family that built the ship. And so the main family that we're following, the Vestrit family, has one of these live ships that are made partly of wizard wood. And 3 generations ago, the ship was commissioned, and the ship gradually becomes more and more alive as each successive generation of Vestrits passes away, and their kind of souls and life forces get kind of wrapped up in the ship. So we're following basically the awakening of the Vestrit's live ship Vivacia, because they've hit that 3-generation mark. And so the live ship quickens, she comes alive, and then all hell breaks loose. And so I mentioned in my wrap-up video, my mid-month wrap-up video, that there's a ton of family drama. So there's a lot of like cultural evolution stuff that's going on here. So this Bingtown and Rainwild River area that's been dominated by 60, 70 or so trading families for a very long time, there have been all kinds of other socio-political changes in the areas around them, and more people are coming in and don't really understand the traditions and the history of what living in this area is like, and the trade-offs that these families have made in order to be able to have access to magical goods to trade. And these newcomers are bringing in other beliefs and everything. And so the existing Bingtown trader social life and business is much more equal between the sexes than a lot of societies. And then a lot of the newcomers are coming in are very misogynist and very patriarchal. And so those changes start to impact the Vestrit family, and in particular, one of the daughters of the Vestrit family, Althea, who has a very strong bond with their live ship. So there's a whole bunch of family drama there that I found just super interesting, because it does echo some of the culture clashes and changes that we see a lot today in a lot of our national conversation about the role of women and respect for women, and what women can and can't do. You know, we're still having those conversations in the real world. And so this book really kind of amplifies and illustrates them, I think, in some very powerful ways. So that's all the kind of trading stuff. But then we also have pirates, because the whole coast from this Bingtown area I mentioned in the north down to the capital city of Jamalia is called the Cursed Shores. It's not super developed. There's a lot of little towns, and just off the coast, the kind of passage that's really navigable by sailing ship is just littered with tiny islands and dangerous shoals and everything. And so there's a big pirate community that preys on trading vessels. And so we are also following a pirate captain, Kenneth, who is he's kind of like a damaged, brooding villain type, with very selfish ends in mind. He wants to gain power and gain wealth, and he wants to be a pirate king. Pirates don't really seem amenable to that. So a lot of the book is him kind of trying to figure out, how can I convince the pirates that they need a leader, that we'll all get richer if we put this structure in place. And then he's talking to various people about it, and they'll be like, that's partly what we all tried to escape from by becoming pirates. And so Kenneth kind of hilariously ends up doing good deeds as a way to bring the pirates kind of to him and cooperating with him. And I don't want to say too much about it, because I just thought so much of that was really funny. But a lot of it involves kind of upending the local slave trade. And so there's a whole socio-political thing going on as well, because the current ruler in Jamalia City is a totally corrupt idiot. And so lots of like really large scale changes are happening, with neighboring kingdoms starting to eye pieces of the territory here, increasing slave trade. And so we get a lot of conversation by various people about the immorality of the slave trade, about how people can get kind of sucked up in it as a way to earn money. There's a lot of moral discussion in here about the choices that people make. And to me, as you know, given our 20th century history, the place my mind immediately goes is people who were collaborators in the Holocaust, and like at all levels, like very deliberate, high-level collaborators that knew exactly what was going on. But you know, we also talk now, you know, even today in our modern media, we talk about the very low-level collaborators. You know, just this idea of like people who felt that they had no choice, and maybe legitimately their families were in danger or could be threatened. But just the danger of speaking out against a system that is kind of gaining in popularity and has a lot of support, and where the people who support it use terrifying tactics to implement it. And so it can be really scary. And so Hobb does kind of confront that in this book, just that question of like, still every individual has a choice. And so when you're confronting in this book something like a slave trade, or if you're in Nazi Germany, thinking about Hitler's rise to power, you know, it's like we do all have a choice. The choices might suck. it might be that you either collaborate or die, but like that's still a choice. And so I think that conversation in this book is really interesting. And there are conversations in this book about all kinds of deep topics. There's a lot of consideration about what makes you who you are. Can you still be yourself even if you're in like a totally a situation where you totally have no control, or a situation where all of the outward things that you think are who you are or that you think signal who you are ripped away from you. And of course that's applicable to some of the actual slaves that are in this book, but also to one of the main characters. I mentioned Althea, the young girl who has a bond with the Liveship. Her nephew is also in this book and actually has kind of a parallel experience of, with a lot of violence and trauma, having his kind of chosen vocation and passion and what he really thinks his life is meant to do ripped away from him, and being put in contexts where a lot of dehumanization is happening. And so I think I'm talking a lot now, but so I'm going to try to wrap up now. But like, that's really what makes me love a really good fantasy or sci-fi book, is when the author is really deliberately kind of playing with things that have a lot of bearing in the real world, but that can be really hard to think about or talk about with like our super specific real world examples. And in sci-fi and fantasy, you can just break a lot of reality to focus on, specific issues or problems, or play with them in different ways to illuminate different facets, and just have a different conversation about it. And so I think Hobb with this book, and hopefully with the next two books in the trilogy, she's in that category of, to me, the greatest fantasy and sci-fi writers, where I'm reading this totally made up story in a totally alien world, and I'm seeing new aspects of parts of my world. And yeah, I don't know, to me, that's like part of the whole point about it. And it's also lovely and escapist and beautiful storytelling. She is never preaching. This is all just coming about with conversations and the characters, and with characters just like thinking about what choice they're going to make in a given moment. But the situations that she's putting them in are situations where it's like, oh, this is ringing a bell, and I'm actually learning kind of a new nuance or a new viewpoint for something that I'm familiar with in our world and in our time. So that's why I love this book so much. Oh my gosh. Oh, and I mentioned, yeah, well, and there are these ancient serpents that are like the White Walkers, where it's like, they're around, they have an agenda that we do not understand. And all hell is going to break loose with those serpents, like at some point. Like, it's very stressful. So it's definitely got, it's got like everything a good fantasy book should have, in my opinion. I could keep going on and on about this book, but I think I'm going to try to wrap it up there, because I like to keep my videos shorter. So yeah, I almost want to give this book, I do want to give this book 5 stars. The only thing I would say against it is that it does have a very common failing that a lot of these mammoth fantasy books have, is that it's like 800 pages of gorgeous storytelling, gorgeous character development. A lot of stuff does happen, could be a little bit shorter. But then in like so many of these giant epic fantasy books, the end of the book ends up feeling like a rush. And I'm like, how are you rushed? You just wrote for 809 pages. It's not a surprise that you have to end the book. Like, what? So the end did feel just like a teeny bit rushed, and it's a very standard ending. Like, all of the characters and viewpoints all kind of come together in one place, and like a big thing happens. It's very exciting. Some things are kind of temporarily resolved. There's a lot of unanswered questions that can propel you into the next book. So all very standard, but it just happened in a way that felt a little bit rushed. So I think I would probably give it 4.5 stars for that reason. So it'll be 5 on Goodreads. It sounds stupid even while I'm saying it. I freaking loved this book. It was hard to put down. I was like ignoring my kid and my partner. Like, it was great. 4.5, 5 stars. Absolutely loved this. And I will definitely be continuing with the trilogy. And I forgot to mention, I am reading this with a group of people, with Megan at Megan's Reading Revelations, and a group of people in her Discord. So if you want to hop in on the next 2 books in this series, and see what we've been chatting about with the first book, we're going to read the next 2 books in the months of April and then in May as well. So 1 per month isn't too bad. But yeah, I will link her channel below, and her Discord link is in all of her video descriptions. So yeah, head on over there if you want to chat about it, or just chat about it with me if you're reading it. All right, thanks for listening to me gush about an epic fantasy book. I hope you all had a good week, and I hope you are having a good weekend when this video goes up on Saturday. If you're not yet subscribed to me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.